My name is Adrian, and I'm 41 years old. I work as a restaurant chef. After several years of experience, I became one of the best. Food is my passion, and I love to cook. Becoming a top chef improved my paycheck, but at the same time, it also increased my responsibilities. I have several people working under my direction, and nothing less than perfection is expected when our meals are served. It's a very exciting and rewarding job, but also very demanding. Perhaps one of the reasons why I never married or started a family. So every time I have a few days off, I like to get the best out of them. Mostly, I need to relax and to rest, but not in a boring way, like staying home, watching TV while sitting on the couch. I like to release my stress, mostly around nature. I enjoy the feeling of being surrounded by trees, the ocean, or mountains. It's the perfect way for both body and mind to replenish energies. That's why I decided to buy a cottage and a small property surrounded by a vast forest a couple of years ago. The perfect place for me to read and to take long walks. The cottage also has a fireplace, which meant I can also go there during the cold season. And this is precisely what I did last winter. I was going to work on Christmas Eve, something that happened often in my area. Once again, I wouldn't be visiting my parents and sister during such a special holiday. But at least I could forget about that emotional period by spending 3 days in my delightful cottage during the week before Christmas. But not alone, by all means. My dog, Brownie, would be my faithful companion. A few days later, it was snowing, and everything looked magnificent up there in the woods when I arrived, taking my car, of course. The snow wasn't too much, though, just enough to cover the trees and the grass in a big white blanket. Once inside the cottage, I put some wood in the fireplace, which quickly made the place warm and cozy, and I prepared a simple meal for myself and Brownie. I was having the most pleasant evening. I read a novel, listened to the music, and enjoyed a glass of really good red wine. While I sat comfortably and safely inside my cottage, a chilly wind blew outside. Brownie was asleep next to me. I always loved these small contrasts, which make things seem more enjoyable. It was already 2 a.m. when I decided to call it a day. Besides the main room, the cottage also had 2 small bedrooms. Me and Brownie were sleeping in the bigger one. Didn't take long for me to fall asleep once I switched off the lights. Unfortunately, it didn't take long for me to wake up either. I heard someone knocking on the cottage's front door. At first, I thought it was an animal, because who could be up there in the middle of a snowy and cold, pitch-black night? But I was now listening to a human voice, coming from the other side of the door. I have to admit, initially, I just stood still in my warm and comfortable bed, praying that whoever was there would simply go away. I was probably being selfish, but I was also a bit scared. What if that person wanted to rob me? Or worse, harm me? Being in the middle of the woods does bring out some survival instinct, and my situation was vulnerable. In any case, the human-produced noises coming from outside didn't end. In fact, besides the door, I could listen to knockings and beatings surrounding the entire cottage. The walls were also being harassed, which means there were several individuals outside. I could hear their voices. They sounded like female voices. Like they were crying for help, in despair. I was terrified, and I wanted to call for help myself. Brownie started barking inside my bedroom, which only made my unwelcomed visitors more excited. A couple of them were now barking too, as in response to my dog. Very creepy. A part of me was hoping that it was just a prank. Some youngsters who went to the forest to smoke some weed and, when seeing the cottage and my car outside, decided to have some fun at my expense. After one long hour, the noises finally stopped. Even Brownie was silent and calm again. This was a good sign, since dogs are great sensors of danger or intruders. And it's not just because of their excellent sense of smell. I think they have this sixth sense or something like that. I was finally able to go back to sleep. When I woke up, it was already 3 p.m., but it was fine. I was on vacation. Oh, so much for relaxing, I said to myself while preparing my coffee, still feeling uneasy due to the events from the previous night. I looked outside through the window, and there they were, the footprints on the snow from several individuals. But I also saw that my car's windows were broken, and this made me angry. "What the Come on!" I shouted as I went outside to see what other damage had been made. Followed by Brownie, I approached the car. And as I did, I screamed when I saw someone's head popping up. Someone was inside my car. A thin and frail-looking woman, very dirty, was smiling at me, as if she'd been waiting for me to come up. Some of her teeth were missing. "Hey, what are you doing here? Can I help you?" I asked. The woman's eyes were creepy, and she started to laugh, an insane laughter. I was about to have the response to one of my questions. Coming from the woods, more creepy women were now showing up. There were 3 of them. They all were very dirty with long hair. All of them were horrific, just like their old clothes, already in pretty bad shape. The whole group of 4 was now running towards me, screaming like chimpanzees, like hostile chimpanzees. I ran like a maniac back to the cottage, knowing that I was running for my life. I was able to get inside, and I locked the door behind me, but Brownie, brave as he was, didn't follow me. Instead, he kept barking at them, trying to protect me. In spite of being able to bite and to scare them away for a few minutes, Brownie proved to be no match for those apparently frail-looking, dirty women. I was shocked to see that they had knives with them. In tears, I stood there helpless. I saw Brownie being killed by that haunting group. I wanted to call 911, but I had no idea how to tell them where I was, what kind of directions I could give them, especially being so nervous. Fortunately, killing Brownie seemed to satisfy that group's thirst for blood, as they returned to where they came from, deep into the woods. At least for the moment. But I wasn't going to wait any longer. Regardless of the broken windows, everything else was fine with my car. I drove back to the city as fast as I could. I reported what happened to the police and took them to my cottage. The body of my dog was gone, but the bloodstains could still be seen, painting the snow in red. As for those dangerous and primitive women, they're still to be found by the authorities. I miss Brownie. Sometimes I think that I act like a mouse. Had I shown more courage... But they had knives with them, and it was 4 of them, so what could I really do? Brownie sacrificed himself for me. I mean, that's what pets are for, right?
Too scared to subscribe?
I shuffled down the road as the cold wind bit through my bones. The winter had always been my favorite season. A season of joy, happiness, and snow. Lots and lots of snow. I had a job to do, and my job had ways of making young women happy. My sister always wanted to be a snow girl. I would have made that wish come true if she hadn't left me. She grew up and became a lawyer, not a snow girl. So I decided to make dreams come true for other young women, especially those with unhappy lives. My eyes went to the house across the street. I had been watching them for a while through their window. The lady and her boyfriend argued all the time. She worked at the bank, and I knew everything about her. I had been following her. I had slept in her bed one hot summer afternoon. I had a duplicate key to their house. Her name was Kristen Powell, and she managed my accounts. The boyfriend slapped her in anger. Tears streamed down her face, and she held herself tightly. It was time to make a move. I crossed the street, pushing my hands deeper into my black coat. I moved slowly until I got to the door. I waited patiently, listening to the steady rhythms of her sobs. "I just hate everything. I hate my life," she screamed. She was perfect. I rang the doorbell 4 times before she came to the door, opened it up, and smiled. "Dr. Gardner, she said with surprise. "How can I help you?" It was a small town, and everyone knew everyone. Her eyes were still watery, and her face was red. She didn't do a good job of covering up her tears. I was amused. "My truck just broke down nearby. I was wondering if you could help me see what's wrong with it." "Of course," she said. "I'll go get my coat." I slowly tapped my foot as I waited for her. No one would want to refuse an old man. She came out wearing a purple coat and multicolored mittens. She looked lovely. We walked to the road to the place my truck stood. I told her to get into the driver's seat to start the car, and she was surprised when I got into the passenger seat. I wasn't as agile as I used to be, so I had to lure her out, and it worked. "Would you like to be a snow girl?" I asked. She looked confused. She was probably thinking that I had gone senile. A quick motion. I brought out a white handkerchief containing chloroform and put it to her nose. In seconds, she was knocked out. I managed to push her back into the back seat. I drove through the woods for almost 3 hours, driving through the uneven terrain until we got to my cabin, the one I had spent the last 7 years building. It was dark by then, and Catherine was still unconscious. The whole town would be searching for her by now. I chuckled to myself as I carried her in my arms. The cabin was cold, and I loved the cold. It reflected how I felt when my sister left me all alone in this terrible world. The cabin was my safe haven, the place I ran to when I didn't feel like being the community veterinarian doctor. It was memorabilia to my beautiful sister Sammy. She was the only person I had, and death took her from me. We were orphans, abandoned by our parents when we were little. Sammy was fascinated with the snow when we were little, and she often told me that she would be content to be a snow girl. She was my big sister, and she was always looking out for me. Even when people said I was sick in the head, she defended me. She couldn't get adopted because she wouldn't leave me. She made sure I got education, and she encouraged me when I told her that I wanted to take care of animals. She broke up with her fiancé when he said he couldn't stand me lurking around. But she had a sad life, and I never knew. It was a life sad enough to take her own life. I couldn't make her a snow girl. It was all for the best. I lived a lonely life and never had a wife or kids. I had made 6 young women who had lives similar to Sammy's into snow girls in every town I moved to. I didn't get caught because the women were always found in the middle of nowhere. My movements were without any logical connection, and Christine would be the final snow girl, the 7th, the perfect one, after which the time would come to make myself a snowman, the best that ever lived. I placed the young lady on a sofa and shuffled to the dark wood drawer close to the fireplace. I didn't light up the fire. We didn't need fire. We needed ice. I brought out the syringe I had kept for special purposes. Christine stirred, and I knew I had to act fast while she was still sleepy. Lincomycin was perfect for the job. I used it at my vet clinic to treat animals, but it was best for neuromuscular paralysis. I hovered over Christine, prepared to do my job. I preferred her eyes to be open as I injected her. She slowly opened her eyes, and confusion washed over her. "Dr. Garner, what's going on?" She slurred, eyes filling with tears. You see, I said as I released the liquid into her system. She cried and struggled as it moved through her body. In a few minutes, she couldn't move or talk. Almost a snow girl. Almost perfect. I carried her gently to the back of the cabin where it was coldest. I sat her against the cabin wall. In a few hours, she would be frozen. She would be a beautiful masterpiece made by nature and my hands. Tears ran down her face and I smiled. It'll all be over soon. You will make a beautiful snow girl. I couldn't wait for hours. The police would begin their search into the woods in a few hours. I needed to inject myself too. I returned to the cabin and injected a lethal dose into my body. I wrote a note to the police explaining myself and returned to my place right next to Christine. I took a photograph of Sammy out of my pocket and stared at it. She was 25, standing next to a snowman, a few months before death took her away from me. I would die soon, and her angelic face would be the last I saw. I closed my eyes and waited for death to come, and that was when I heard the voices, the barks, and the running boots. I see a cabin, I heard a voice say. It was my turn to cry. No, this should have been perfection. They weren't supposed to find me so soon. I tried to get up, but I couldn't. The liquid was already working. I could only sit and cry just like Christine. Soon enough, the search team found us side by side at the back of the cabin. My snow girl and I. Their torches beamed on me, and everyone was in awe. Dr. Garner! Some screamed, some whispered, but all were disappointed. I had taken care of their pets one time or another. Christine was quickly taken and bundled up. Her hypocrite boyfriend was there, crying with relief that Christine was still breathing. They were going to take her to the hospital. My perfect snow girl had been destroyed. I felt weak. I was going to die without my snow girl. 2 men in police uniforms lifted me up and took me to a hospital. I should have died. Staying alive was worse than death. I was sentenced to life imprisonment. I would live with many regrets. I wish I died a snowman.